Careful, everyone. Don't let the fat pig get too close to the cake. She might eat it all. The words sliced through the golden hall like a whip. The music stuttered, laughter from the bride's table swelled, and my heart dropped into the pit of my stomach. I froze, standing under the glittering chandeliers, every eye turning toward me. My daughter-in-law, flawless in her white lace, dripping with diamonds, smirked as though she'd just delivered the punchline of the century. Her friends doubled over with cruel giggles. Even some distant relatives stifled grins behind their napkins. And my son, my own flesh and blood, stood stiff beside her, tugging at his cufflinks, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. Not a word of defense, not a single look my way. Heat flooded my cheeks, my fingers clutching my clutch bag so tightly I thought the seam would rip. My knees trembled beneath the weight of their stares. I wanted to shrink into the marble floor, to vanish before their judgment could sear any deeper. "Look at her face," one woman whispered, not low enough. "Poor thing." "Poor? She shouldn't even be here in that dress," another sneered. The whispers spread like fire. Each word, dagger, dagger, dagger. I swallowed hard, lifting my chin, refusing to let the tears fall. If I cried, they would win. If I broke, they would never forget it. I stood taller, though inside every part of me screamed. The bride tilted her head, eyes gleaming with mockery. Honestly, someone should have told her this isn't a farmyard gathering, it's a wedding. Laughter exploded again, echoing against the vaulted ceiling, cruel and merciless. I forced myself to breathe, to stay rooted. My life, 30 years of sacrifice, of raising my son alone after his father's illness, of selling my jewelry to pay for his education, reduced to a punchline in my daughter-in-law's mouth. I searched the hall desperately, needing one kind face, one anchor. And then I saw him, the bride's father. At first he was laughing with the rest, red-faced with champagne and pride. But when his eyes met mine, the laughter died. His jaw slackened, his grip on his glass faltered. The color drained from his cheeks as though he had seen something, someone. He wished he hadn't. His gaze locked on me, wide, panicked. Recognition flickered there, a memory clawing its way up from the depths. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Let the others laugh. Let them jeer. His silence was louder than all of them, because while my humiliation filled the room, his eyes told me one thing. He knew exactly who I was, and that truth would burn through every smug smile in this hall. They thought I was just a fat pig in a borrowed dress, but her father knew better, and soon everyone else would too. Before we dive into what happened next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming shocking stories. As the laughter of that wedding hall still echoed in my mind, I thought back to the life that had shaped me. Because humiliation? I had known it long before my daughter-in-law ever spat her venom at me. I wasn't always the woman standing quietly in the shadows of grand parties. I had once been a young bride myself, 20 years old, clutching a bouquet of white roses, looking into the eyes of a man who promised me the world. He wasn't rich, but he was kind, at least at first. We built our life together in a small town, in a modest home where the walls carried the scent of stew and the laughter of one little boy, my son. Money was always tight. When his father fell ill, it became even tighter. I worked nights cleaning offices, then rose at dawn to sell vegetables at the market. My hands cracked from soap, my back ached from lifting crates, but I never once let my son go hungry. "Mom, why don't you sit down?" he'd ask, watching me iron his school uniform long after midnight. "Because you need to look neat," I'd smile, and because sitting doesn't put food on the table. It wasn't just work, it was sacrifice. When other mothers wore new dresses to Sunday service, I wore the same faded gown I'd patched a dozen times. When families traveled for Christmas, I stayed home, scrimping every coin to pay the electricity bill. People noticed. They always notice. They whispered, "She's let herself go. She's getting heavy." If she'd cared more about her looks, maybe life would have turned out different. I pretended not to hear, but I heard, and each word stuck like a thorn in my skin. Still, I kept going. Because while they mocked my weight, I was building something else. Quietly, patiently. When my husband's condition worsened, I sat by his hospital bed for hours, reading medical bills I could barely understand. I begged for extensions, bargained with doctors, sold my wedding bangles for a handful of cash that barely covered a week's medicine. "Don't cry," he whispered once, his fingers weak in mine. "You're stronger than you think." But strength is a funny thing. You don't realize you have it until it's the only thing keeping you alive. When he passed, the town pitied me. They said I was finished. A widow, overweight, plain, and tired. "She won't survive without him," one neighbor muttered as I walked past the bakery one morning. They were wrong. I found work wherever I could, typing documents for lawyers, cooking for events, even scrubbing toilets in offices too proud to acknowledge me. Every job left me humiliated in one way or another, but humiliation doesn't break you when you know you're building for something bigger. Because behind their backs, I was saving. Every single coin. I opened a small savings account no one knew about, then another. Then, when I heard a friend whisper about stocks, I dared to step into that world. At first, I lost. But I learned. And when I learned, I grew. I wasn't flashy, and I wasn't quick. But I was steady. While they laughed at me, I was quietly learning the art of patience, turning small savings into investments, investments into property, and property into something much larger. But no one saw that. Not my son, not my neighbors, not the women who called me pig under their breath in markets. All they saw was the widow who walked with a heavier step, whose arms jiggled when she carried baskets of bread, whose dresses never quite fit. They didn't see the bank slips hidden in my Bible. They didn't see the contracts I read late at night by candlelight. They didn't see the woman who had already climbed out of the pit they dug for her. So when I stood at that wedding and the bride sneered her insult across the hall, part of me wanted to laugh. Not because it didn't hurt. Oh, it did. But because she had no idea. No idea of the nights I went to bed hungry so my son could eat meat. No idea of the coins I pressed into his hand for field trips while I walked home barefoot because my shoes had worn through. No idea of the empire I was quietly building under their noses. She thought I was just a fat pig. And maybe in that moment, that's all anyone else saw. But I knew better. Her father knew better. And very soon, everyone else would too. Humiliation has a way of blinding people. They see only the surface, the shaking hands, the flushed cheeks, the bowed head. What they never notice is what lies beneath. I let them laugh at me, let them whisper their cruel names, because I learned long ago that the greatest strength is silence. You watch, you wait. And when the time is right, you strike. The bride's words that day were not the first to cut me, nor would they be the last. But she didn't know that I had already built armor, not of steel, but of knowledge. It began years ago, back when my husband's illness left me drowning in bills. I realized quickly that charity would not save me and pity would not feed my son. So I started studying. Quietly. In the back of libraries, hunched over borrowed newspapers, I traced the business section like scripture. Words like equity, dividends, returns were foreign at first. But I learned. Oh, how I learned. While others laughed at my size, I memorized numbers. While they mocked my dress, I was calculating risks. While they called me useless, I was planting seeds for a forest they would one day beg to enter. I never flaunted it. That was my secret weapon. By the time my son finished school, I had already bought small plots of land on the outskirts of town. Worthless to most. But I knew roads would come, cities would grow, and what was cheap today would be gold tomorrow. The first time I signed a deed, the clerk barely looked at me. "Mrs. Williams, are you sure?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "It's nothing but bushland." I smiled. Bushland feeds cities one day. He chuckled, dismissive, but I held the pen steady. Years later, that bushland became a row of factories, and the money they offered me for it could have bought me 100 gowns like the ones my daughter-in-law flaunted. But I didn't tell a soul. Not my son, not my friends, not even my pastor, because I knew human nature. The moment they smelled money, the kindness would vanish, replaced by greed. So I kept it quiet. Stocks, real estate, a small bakery I invested in that doubled within a year, a transport company whose shares I bought when others panicked, one after another, little bricks stacked until I had built a fortress no insult could crumble. And yet I walked the streets in the same patched dresses, hair tied in the same simple bun, shoes polished but plain. "Poor Linda," the neighbors said. "She never remarried. She let herself go." Let them think that. Let them believe I was nothing. Because the best revenge is not just proving them wrong, it's watching their faces when the truth lands like a thunderbolt. That night, after the wedding insult, I sat in my room replaying the bride's words in my head. They stung, I won't lie. No matter how much armor you build, cruelty always finds a way through. But then I remembered her father's face. The way his glass slipped, his laughter died, his skin turned pale when he saw me. And I smiled, because he knew. He knew that I wasn't just the fat pig his daughter mocked. He knew I was the woman whose signature had crossed his desk years before. The woman who had quietly signed the documents that shifted his empire. The woman who, piece by piece, had acquired more power over his company than he himself held. I didn't need to humiliate his daughter. She'd already done that herself by showing her cruelty. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment. The moment when the world would realize that the woman they mocked was the same woman who held their future in the palm of her hand. It was coming. And when it came, the fall would be brutal. That night, as I sipped my tea, I thought about the irony. My daughter-in-law laughed at me for my size. But what she didn't realize was that every curve on my body carried a story of survival. These arms, mocked for being thick, had carried baskets of firewood, sacks of flour, crates of fruit to the market before dawn. These hands, calloused and wrinkled, had signed contracts men 3 times my stature begged to understand. This belly she ridiculed had endured nights of hunger so my son could eat. If that makes me a pig, then let me be the fattest pig alive, because pigs are not just mocked, they are underestimated, and the underestimated always have the sharpest bite. At the wedding, I said nothing. I ate nothing. I laughed at nothing. I let them revel in their illusion of superiority. But in my heart, I counted the days. I would simply stand, with the dignity they said I never had, and let the truth break them apart. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest weapon of all. The laughter still rang in my ears, though the music had resumed and the clinking of glasses filled the hall once more. The bride basked in her moment of cruelty, fluttering her lashes, leaning into the applause of her bridesmaids. My son offered her his arm as though nothing had happened, and together they moved toward the head table. But I remained where I stood, rooted in place, because across the room I felt his eyes drilling into me. Her father. He was a man of presence. Broad shoulders, silver hair slicked back, his suit tailored to perfection. The kind of man who had built his reputation on power and intimidation. Tonight, he was supposed to be the king of this castle, presiding over his daughter's wedding with pride and dominance. But at that moment, he looked nothing like a king. He looked like a man who had just seen the ghost of his ruin. His glass of champagne trembled in his hand, a few drops spilling onto his polished shoes. His laughter had died so abruptly that the men beside him leaned closer, puzzled. But he waved them off, forcing a smile back onto his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And those eyes, they never left me. I could almost see the memories unspooling behind them. The meetings, the documents, the signatures that had crossed his desk years ago. He had brushed me off then, too. I was just another name, another small player in a world of giants. He hadn't expected me to matter. But I had mattered, more than he ever realized. Now, recognition twisted his features, his jaw tightening, his throat working as though he had swallowed something sharp. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply held his gaze. Let his daughter laugh, let the guests jeer, let my son bury his shame in silence. This man knew who I was, and that was enough. "Are you all right, Richard?" One of his business partners leaned over, frowning at him. "I'm fine," he muttered, voice too tight, too clipped. He set the glass down and tugged at his collar as if the room had suddenly grown unbearably warm. But he wasn't fine. I could see it in the way his hand twitched against the linen tablecloth, in the way his eyes darted from me back to the bride, then back again. I had unsettled him, and he couldn't hide it. The bride's laughter rose again from the dais. "Father," she called out, cheeks flushed with triumph. "You saw that, didn't you? Did you see how she just stood there? Pathetic." Her words cut like knives, but they no longer drew blood. Because now I wasn't the only one who knew the truth. Richard forced a chuckle, but it sounded hollow, strained. "Yes, dear," he said, raising his glass. "Quite something." His daughter didn't notice. She twirled, showing off her gown, basking in the attention. But I noticed. Oh, I noticed. The tremor in his hand, the darting of his eyes, the sweat beading at his temple despite the coolness of the air-conditioned hall. He knew, and worse, he was terrified. I remembered the first time I saw his name. Years ago, stamped on documents tied to a company so vast it seemed untouchable. He was arrogant then, untouchable, dismissing small investors like me as though we were gnats buzzing around his empire. But gnats bite, and sometimes gnats carry poison. I had acquired shares he didn't know I had. I had invested in lands he once dismissed as worthless. Piece by piece, the puzzle had shifted, and he hadn't even realized I was the one sliding the pieces into place. Until now. And that realization left him rattled. I lifted my chin slightly, offering him the smallest, faintest smile. Not of joy, not of triumph, but of acknowledgement. I see you, and you see me. It was enough. His jaw tightened further, his hand clenched into a fist under the table, and he looked away, pretending to be engrossed in the speed. The day my daughter-in-law would learn who signed the papers that controlled her father's wealth. The day my son would realize the mother he dismissed was the reason he stood in a fine suit at all. The day they would choke on their own arrogance. That day was not far, and when it arrived, I would not raise my voice. I would not insult them. I would not stoop to their level. His mind was already spiraling, racing back to contracts, to boardroom tables, to the realization that the woman his daughter had just mocked in front of the entire wedding was the same woman who could undo everything he had built. I sat quietly, folding my hands in my lap. I did not eat. I did not drink. I did not join in the applause. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think I was wounded. Only he knew the truth, that the woman they had ridiculed was the very storm gathering on his horizon, and that was enough. Later, when the bride and groom danced their first dance, I watched him out of the corner of my eye. His movements were stiff, his laughter forced. Every so often his gaze flicked toward me, sharp and wary, like a man watching a snake coiled in the grass. He feared me, And yet, he could not reveal why. That was the beauty of it. The humiliation had been mine in public, but in private, the shame was his. And soon that private shame would become public too. That night I let them laugh, I let them jeer, but as the music played and the lights glittered, only one truth mattered. Her father had seen me. He knew, and very soon the whole world would too. Weddings are supposed to end in joy, but when I left that hall there was no joy in me. Only silence, only the echo of cruel laughter and the heavy, unspoken stare of a man who suddenly realized the world was no longer his to control. But weddings are also breeding grounds for gossip. And gossip, once released, grows wings. By the time I reached home that night, the whispers had already begun to spread. She just stood there while they mocked her. Poor woman. Though I heard she's not so poor after all. No, you don't understand. Did you see Richard's face? He recognized her. Something's there. Something big. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly. Messages from old acquaintances, neighbors, even women who hadn't spoken to me in years. Linda, is it true you're involved with the company? Why did Richard look so pale when he saw you? You've been hiding something, haven't you? I ignored them all. Silence had always been my shield. Let them talk. The more they speculated, the more they would feed the fire. But silence is never enough for the greedy. By the end of that week she came, Clara, my daughter-in-law, no longer wrapped in lace and diamonds, but in suspicion and spite. She showed up at my doorstep, her manicured nails tapping against the frame as if she owned it. "Mother," she said flatly, not even bothering to smile. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, allowing her in. She strutted across my modest living room, her eyes scanning every detail, looking for cracks, for evidence. "You've been hiding things," she said finally, lowering herself onto the couch. "I don't know how or why, but my father knows you. I saw his face that night, and now people are whispering that you're involved. With his business, with money, with something." I sat opposite her, folding my hands in my lap. "And what if I am?" Her jaw tightened. "Then you've been lying to us. To me. To my husband. Playing the victim while secretly hoarding wealth and power. Do you know how humiliating that makes me look? I called you a fat pig in front of everyone." Her words struck like another slap, but I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said evenly. "You did." For the first time, a flicker of discomfort crossed her face. Later that evening, my son arrived. His face was red, his tie loose, exhaustion in his eyes. He paced my living room like a man preparing for war. "Mom," he began, "Clara says you're involved with her father's company. Is it true? Please just tell me the truth." I studied him. My boy. My only son. The child I had fed when I had nothing. The man I had sent to school with, borrowed money and whispered prayers. And yet here he stood, not as my son, but as Clara's husband. "Why do you want to know?" I asked quietly. "Because people are talking," he snapped. "They're saying you're some sort of investor, owner, I don't even know." Clara is embarrassed. Dad-in-law is acting strange, and I'm stuck in the middle of this mess. I rose slowly, my knees aching, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are not stuck in the middle, son. You chose your side the moment you let your wife call me a pig and said nothing." His eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shame flickering across his face. The gossip grew louder with each passing day. Neighbors who once ignored me now waved eagerly. Shopkeepers lingered when I walked in, their eyes curious. And Richard, the bride's father, avoided me altogether. At board meetings, I knew his hands shook whenever my name came up. But Clara wasn't satisfied with whispers. She wanted proof. I began to notice her shadowing me, in markets, outside banks, even once outside the gates of a property I owned. Always pretending it was a coincidence, always smiling too tightly. One day, she confronted me again, this time with fire in her eyes. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she spat. "Hiding behind your silence, letting everyone think you're just some pitiful old widow. But I see you. I know there's something you're not saying. And when I find out, when I expose you, everyone will know who the real pig is." I stared at her, calm and steady, my voice low. "You don't have to dig, Clara. The truth always rises on its own." At home that night, I sat by the window, staring into the quiet street. I thought of my son, trapped in a marriage where loyalty meant cruelty. I thought of Clara, clawing desperately at the image she'd built for herself. And I thought of Richard, the man whose empire I had silently stepped into, the man who knew I held the strings now. They thought the wedding humiliation was the end of me, but it was only the beginning, because whispers have power. And soon, whispers would turn into revelations. It didn't take long before the whispers became daggers. The laughter that had once been behind my back started creeping into my face. People wanted answers, and Clara wanted blood. She came again, this time not alone. Her mother trailed behind her, lips pursed, her perfume arriving 3 seconds before she did. And then came Richard, towering, trying to mask his unease with authority. They didn't knock politely. They barged in. "Enough games," Clara snapped, her heels clicking against my wooden floor like hammers. "We know there's something you're hiding. My father won't say it, but I see it in his face every time your name is mentioned. You've been sneaking around his company, haven't you?" I remained seated in my armchair, the same one where I had prayed, wept, and counted coins so many years ago. I didn't move. I didn't blink. "Answer me," Clara shouted. Her mother scoffed. "For heaven's sake, Clara, look at her. Do you really think this woman could be capable of something so elaborate? She's been playing pity all her life. Don't give her so much credit." Richard's jaw twitched. He said nothing, but his eyes darted from me to the floor. That silence was all the confirmation they needed. "You see?" Clara hissed, pointing at him. He knows. He knows you're involved. And I want to know how. Why? What gives you the right to meddle in our lives?" I leaned forward slowly, clasping my hands together. My voice was soft, almost gentle. "What gives me the right?" I echoed. 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of ridicule, 30 years of being laughed at, spat on, ignored. That gives me the right. Clara's face twisted. "Oh, spare us the sob story. You're nothing but a bitter old woman clinging to scraps. Admit it, you've been using my father's company to leech off our family." I smiled faintly. "If I were leeching, Clara, your father would not look as though he's swallowed poison every time he sees me." Her mother gasped. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his hand tightening around the back of a chair. Clara stepped closer, her voice rising. "You humiliated me at my own wedding." I tilted my head. "No, my dear, you humiliated yourself. I just stood there. You chose cruelty, and now you choke on the consequences." The room grew heavy. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound. Clara's eyes burned, but beneath the fire was something else. Fear. Fear that the power she thought she had was slipping through her fingers. Her mother broke the silence. "We don't need to listen to this nonsense. Clara, come. She's bluffing." But Clara didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on me, sharp, desperate. "No, she knows something, and I'm going to find out." I stood then, slowly, deliberately. The room seemed smaller when I rose, not because of my size, but because of the weight of everything they didn't know. "Find out?" I said, my voice calm, steady. "You don't need to. The truth has a way of revealing itself, and when it does, you'll wish you had never asked." Richard finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Enough. Clara, let's go. But Clara spun on him. Why won't you say it? Why won't you admit what you know? His silence was louder than any confession. I walked past them toward the door, opening it wide. You wanted answers. Here is one. I am not afraid of you, not of your insults, not of your greed, and certainly not of your father's empire, because empires fall, especially when they're built on arrogance. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her mother bristled. Richard's eyes, however, would not meet mine. They left in silence, but their fury lingered like smoke. That night, my son came again, his face pale, his words tumbling out in panic. Mom, what did you tell them? Clara says you threatened her. Dad-in-law is furious. People are saying you're dangerous. I looked at him, my heart aching. He still didn't see. He still thought I was fragile, breakable. Dangerous? I repeated softly. No, son, I'm not dangerous. Truth is dangerous. And it's already at your doorstep. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. Why can't you just explain? Just tell me what's going on so I can protect you. I sighed. You cannot protect me from something I don't need protection from. What you should be asking yourself is, who is protecting you? His confusion deepened. What does that even mean? I didn't answer. Some truths needed to simmer. But inside me, the fire burned brighter. This was no longer about humiliation at a wedding. This was no longer about whispers in the street. This was war. And the difference between them and me was simple. They played their games in the open, loud and arrogant. I played mine in silence, with patience as my weapon. They thought they could corner me, demand answers, strip me bare. But they forgot the most important rule. You never corner a woman who has nothing left to lose, because she will burn down the walls around her before she bows. And that was exactly what I intended to do. They thought I would disappear after that confrontation. They thought I would cower in shame, hide in my home, pray the whispers died down. That is what women like me were supposed to do. Swallow the insult, wear the mask, keep silent. But silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. And my strategy had reached its end. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A month later, Richard's company held its annual shareholders meeting, a glittering affair filled with investors, press, and dignitaries. I had attended many before, quietly seated in the back rows, unnoticed, just another name on the list. This year was different. This year, I wasn't a spectator. I was a majority voice. The hall buzzed with anticipation, cameras flashing, journalists scribbling notes. At the front, Richard stood stiff in his suit, forcing a smile, his voice booming across the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Tonight, we celebrate another year of growth, another year of... His words faltered as I entered. Heads turned, whispers rippled. It wasn't the dress I wore, though it was elegant. It wasn't the pearls at my neck, though they gleamed under the lights. It was the fact that I walked with purpose, escorted by the very board members who had once dismissed me. I wasn't a widow in patched dresses anymore. I was the storm they hadn't seen coming. Is that... It can't be. Her? Here? The murmurs grew louder as I took my seat, not at the back, but near the front, beside executives whose names carried weight in the market. Richard froze, his face draining of color. He cleared his throat, trying to recover, but his hands gripped the podium so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, "let us proceed with the agenda." But the agenda wasn't his anymore. It was mine. Halfway through the meeting, when votes were called for new leadership and direction, I rose. The hall hushed instantly. "My name is Linda Williams," I said, my voice carrying steady through the microphone. And as of this year, I hold controlling shares in this company. Shares acquired legally, patiently, and silently while many of you were too busy laughing at women like me to notice. Gasps filled the hall. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Richard's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Clara, seated in the second row with her husband, my son, shot to her feet. "This is a joke," she cried. "She's lying. She's nothing. She's—" I turned my gaze on her, calm, unwavering. "Nothing? Then why does your father tremble every time he sees me?" The room erupted. Journalists scribbled furiously. Investors exchanged stunned looks. Richard slammed his fist on the podium. "You manipulated the system," he barked. "You tricked your way in." I lifted the folder in my hand. Deeds, contracts, certificates, every paper bearing his signature and mine. "No," I said quietly. "I played the same game you did. I just played it better." The board voted, and just like that, the empire shifted. Richard was stripped of key powers, his position weakened, his influence shredded in front of his peers. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I simply stood tall, every insult, every whisper, every cruel laugh echoing in my memory as fuel for this moment. They thought the fat pig would stay in the mud. They forgot that pigs know how to rise. And when they do, they trample. Clara lunged toward me after the meeting, her face twisted with rage. "You humiliated me," she spat. "You humiliated my family." I met her fury with silence, letting the cameras capture every second of her outburst. The world would see her now, not the graceful bride in white, but the venomous woman clawing at shadows. "You did this to yourself," I said softly. "Cruelty always circles back, and now it has found you." My son stood frozen, torn between the woman who birthed him and the woman he married. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. Not toward me, but toward her. He whispered, "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have understood," I thought. "Because you were too blinded by love for a woman who despised me." But aloud I only said, "Some truths must be lived before they can be believed." The news spread like wildfire. Widow becomes majority shareholder. Bride's mother-in-law stuns company. Humiliated at wedding, now queen of the board. The same neighbors who once laughed at me now bowed their heads when I passed. The same women who called me pig now whispered my name with awe. And Clara? She faded. Her sharp tongue dulled. Her arrogance crumbled. Her marriage strained. Because once you've mocked someone publicly, and the world learns you were wrong, you don't recover. Not easily. Not ever. The world shifted after that night. One moment, I was the widow mocked in public. The next, I was the woman whose name echoed through boardrooms and news outlets. But victories come with ripples, and those ripples tore through Clara's perfect world like a storm. She stopped attending parties. The same friends who once laughed beside her now laughed at her. The bride who mocked her mother-in-law, they called her. Videos of the wedding circulated online, side by side with news reports of my takeover. The comments were brutal. Karma came fast. "This is why you don't disrespect people." Imagine calling the woman who owns your father a pig. Her smile disappeared from social media. The diamonds she once flaunted vanished, and her pride, the weapon she had wielded so freely, now cut only herself. Richard fared no better. Investors withdrew support. Shareholders whispered of incompetence. Every meeting he entered, I was there too, seated in authority, calm and unshaken. His voice trembled where mine was steady. His empire, once towering, began to crumble. He tried to fight back at first, throwing accusations, calling me deceitful, desperate. But the evidence silenced him. Paper after paper bore his signature, each one proving that I had played the game fairly, and outplayed him. The humiliation aged him faster than illness ever could. And my son? He came to me one evening, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Mom," he whispered, "I don't know what to do." "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Clara blames me. She says I should have stopped you. She says I should have defended her. But when I look at her now, I don't see the woman I married. I see someone cruel, someone small." His eyes filled with tears. "And when I look at you, I see everything I ignored. All the sacrifices, all the nights you worked so I could stand where I stand. And I did nothing when she shamed you." For a moment, my heart softened. He was still my son, my only child. But wounds like mine don't close overnight. "You let them laugh," I said quietly. "You let them strip me in front of the world, and you said nothing." He bowed his head. I was weak. "Yes," I said. "But weakness can be forgiven if it is followed by strength. What will you do now, son?" His silence was my answer. He didn't know yet. Perhaps he never would. Clara left him months later. Pride would not let her stay married to the son of the woman she despised. And he was left with the bitter taste of regret. But me? I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate loudly. I simply continued. My life, once mocked, now moved with quiet dignity and undeniable strength. The neighbors still whispered, but their whispers had changed. No longer mocking, now reverent, fearful even. "She's untouchable," they said. "She's dangerous. She's powerful." They were right. And yet, I remained the same. I still wore simple dresses. I still tied my hair back in the same bun. I still sat in my old armchair by the window each evening, sipping tea. Because revenge isn't about changing who you are. Revenge is about revealing who you've always been. They never saw me. They never cared to. And that was their greatest mistake. The last time I saw Clara, she was leaving town, her suitcase dragging behind her, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She didn't look at me. She didn't dare. And Richard? He resigned, citing health reasons. But we both knew the truth. His empire had not been stolen. It had been outsmarted by the woman his daughter once called a pig. As for me, I found peace. Not because I destroyed them, but because I proved something larger. That cruelty never wins. That dignity, patience, and silence cut deeper than any insult. That the woman everyone underestimates is often the one they should fear the most. They mocked me, they humiliated me, and they thought I would stay broken. But in the end, they weren't laughing. I was. What do you think happened after Clara left? Did my son ever come back? Or was the bond between us too fractured to heal? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to like if you enjoyed this story and subscribe for more incredible tales of revenge and resilience.